What's really interesting about the Pittsburgh platform, which I think I did mention last time, is this clear rejection of the idea of resurrection as being rooted in Judaism, which on the one hand is silly and wrong, on the other hand is completely right. Right? Certainly on a biblical point of view, there really isn't much to say aside from Daniel. Once we get into rabbinic Judaism, there is much, much more to say. The soul keeps on going, and that is all. And this is something which, if you are a modern, emancipated, thoughtful Jew in the late 19th century, this is something perhaps that would sit well with you. Columbus platform, Judaism affirms that man is created in the divine image. His spirit is immortal. He is an active co-worker with God. As a child of God, it is a phrase we don't tend to use these days, but has some certain Christian undertones, I think. He is endowed with moral freedom and is charged with the responsibility of overcoming evil and striving for ideal ends. Okay. We strive for a faith that fortifies us, the vicissitudes of our lives, illness and healing, transgression and repentance, bereavement and consolation, despair and hope. We continue to have faith that in spite of the unspeakable evils committed against our people and the sufferings endured by others, the partnership of God and humanity will ultimately prevail. We trust in our tradition's promise that although God created us as finite beings, the spirit within us is eternal. So this doesn't even speak of soul specifically, but rather the spirit is eternal, which we could equate with soul or something somewhat different perhaps, that what we've contributed to this world, our spirit that we put out there, in some way continues forever. Finally, in this kind of frame, the affirmation of God had always been essential to our people's will to survive. In our struggle through the centuries to preserve our faith, we've experienced and conceived of God in many ways. The trials of our own time and the challenges of modern culture have made steady belief and clear understanding difficult for some. Nevertheless, we ground our lives personally and communally on God's reality and remain open to new experience and conceptions of divine. Amid the mystery we call life, we affirm that all human beings created in God's image share in God's eternality, despite the mystery we call death. So this is even fudging it perhaps even more, right? We are created in God's image. God is eternal. Therefore, there is something about us which has to be eternal as well, because we are created in the image of God, which of course, certainly since Maimonides, we've always taken to mean we're created in the image of God, not physically, but somewhat metaphysically. But of course, early Judaism did have writings about what God looked like and the corporeality of God. And it is not entirely inconceivable that for certain periods of Jewish history, or perhaps in some level original intention, whatever you want to mean, whatever you want to mean by that, that in fact, the notion that we were created in the image of God actually meant on some physical level as well. That is for another class. Writing about Mishkan Tefillah, which is, I don't remember the year that it came out, a Reform Sidur, we see users of Mishkan Tefillah, the new Reform Sidur, will see that Tchiyat HaMeitim has at last been embraced as a viable option for contemporary Reform Jews. While the basic version of Gvurot prayer uses Mechayeh HaKol, right? So in that second paragraph of the Amidah called Gvurot, right, where we conclude Baruch Atah Hashem Mechayeh HaMeitim, who brings back the dead to life. Reform changed the liturgy early on to Mechayeh HaKol, brings everything to life. This Sidur actually gives an option for Tchiyat HaMeitim. It does restore the praise of God who sends down the rain in winter and dew in summer. The language led to Kohler's evocation of the rain, awakening life in the soul. Mechayeh HaMeitim appears in parentheses. The new Sidur also offers a wonderfully ambiguous translation of the troubling phrase, not you revive the dead, but you revive what was dead, combining some of the beauty of a reviver of all with the possibility of resurrection of whatever is dead in the world. This felicitous rendering is intended to appeal both to those Reformed Jews who are attracted to the mystical idea of resurrection and to those who prefer the belief in the renewing presence of God in all nature. So what's really interesting, as we know generally about Reform Judaism, is the shift away from classical reform to re-embracing certain Hebrew terminology and re-embracing Hebrew as the language of prayer, talit and tefillin and kippah as well, but also partially perhaps because of the, I'll call the neo-Hasidic influence on Reform Judaism, and you see it in Reform Seminary, there is a re-grappling with traditional language. So therefore bringing back Mechayeh HaMetim as an option in parentheses in the Siddur, and contemplating trying to understand it either in the traditional way or in new ways without rejecting the entire thing. Okay, so that's just some ideas, particularly with Reform Judaism, what they have done with this idea of reincarnation in particular, but what happens when we die? Okay, so now, this is a section which I'm calling soul mythology. You all seem to really enjoy last week, if not challenged by what the Talmud and the various stories I shared had to say, but I think it was something which was interesting to you. So what I did to this week is there's a great book called The Mythology of Judaism. I think that's what it's called, by Harold or Howard Schwartz. And I highly recommend it to you. And mythology, not in the, like it's myth, but in the technical sense that this is part of the grand thinking of Judaism. So what he does, and I think he won the National Jewish Book Award for this book, it's really phenomenal. He takes all sorts of ideas that are out there somewhere in Jewish writing, and often he'll combine sources. So from an academic point of view, it's not great, but from a reader's point of view, it's actually very good. But what he does is he actually gives you all the sources if you want to look it up yourself. So he has a whole section there on souls. So we're not going to read all of them. We're going to read some of them. And then what he does is he sort of tells the story, and then he tells you about the story. So let's read this first one. The River of Fire. The angels who serve God one day do not serve him the next. Every single day, new ministering angels are created from the river of fire, known as Rigyon. This is the river in which it is written, a river of fire streamed forth before him. So if you look up Daniel chapter 7, verse 10, you could begin to make the connection perhaps with what comes before. This river springs out of the perspiration of the heavenly creatures who support God's throne of glory and emerges from under the throne. There are a great many bridges of fire that have been placed over the river of fire for the souls of the righteous to cross. Okay, so there are bridges of fire that are placed over the river of fire, and they're there for the souls of the righteous to cross. Before they can sing before God, all the angels must first go down and bathe themselves in the river of fire and dip their tongues and mouths in the river 7 times. Then they encircled the throne of glory, singing hymns of praise to God unceasingly from sunrise to sunset. As it is written, from east to west, the name of God is praised. But those angels who serve him today do not serve him tomorrow. And those who serve him tomorrow will never serve him again. For after they have finished singing for the first and last time, their strength is exhausted and their faces are blackened and their eyes are darkened because of the brilliance of the splendor of the king. Metatron, the chief angel, says to newly created angels, the throne of God is glistening. Immediately the angels fall silent and hasten into the river of fire. There the angels meet their end in the same fiery stream from which they were created, and others are created to take their place. Other angels are consumed by fire that goes forth from God's little finger, as it is said, fire is his vanguard, burning his foes on every side. Why are the angels destroyed? Some say it is because they did not sing the hymns of the celestial liturgy in perfect unison, or do not utter their prayers in the proper order. Others say it is so that the angels do not hear the sound of the speech of God and the explicit name of God that Metatron utters at that time. But the river of fire can restore as well as destroy. This river serves as a heavenly mikvah, the ritual bath in which all souls are immersed. In this way, all impurities are burned up, while all the pure passes through unscathed. So what do we think of this idea that the souls go through a fiery heavenly mikvah to emerge entirely without impurities?
I
Start talking.
can't. Oh, okay. I was thinking that this is kind of a scary thought. I mean, we're trying, like, if you're not behaving yourself and if you're not doing righteous, blah, 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 whatever, and you pass away, you're going to be judged right at that moment. And you're not going to go through this fire. Originally, I just got this, vision of having to go through fire, and what would mean to some people who are trying to live a good Jewish life. But, I think it's scary. That's all. I guess that's enough. It's
scary.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
My mother had Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And when she passed, and I've always had this question, she was unable to speak. She had become blind, deaf. I mean, she went through every stage. So when she passed away, I'm wondering, like, maybe this is an answer that if she goes through the river of fire, she comes back to being, her soul becomes normal. Like, I've always wondered what happened to her. Like, if she had a soul and she was so disformed and there was nothing much left of her, what happened? Like, does she go into eternity to stay like that, or does she ever get resurrected, so to speak?
So I think, a lot of what we've talked about in the last 5 weeks have sort of begun to answer that question. And some of it's recorded. What this text is suggesting, in fact, is that the soul is able to become impure, right? So the soul actually has to go through some sort of purification process, which is not something which we have really thought about or talked about much in this class. But we have talked about, if there is physical resurrection, if that's the way you understand our tradition, what do you look like and how old are you when you come back, right? Do you come back as a bar mitzvah boy or girl? Do you come back as a newlywed, right? When you pop out of that grave or dig on the tunnels underground and show up in Jerusalem, are you 40 or 50 or 60, or do you have Alzheimer's?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think you show up as cognitively entirely present and physically well. I have not seen any sources which suggest otherwise.
Okay, I was just wondering, like, if the soul just goes on forever not being normal.
So, I don't think that the soul is afflicted
right
when the body is afflicted.
Okay, thank you.
Coming from the vantage point, which many of our sources do, of the differentiation between the body and the soul, which, at least according to Neil Gilman, and I concur, is not a biblical division. That idea that those two things are separate only comes up later in history. But there are those who disagree with him. Actually, this week, and I thought I brought it down. Yes. It showed up in the mail for me. Does the soul survive? A Jewish journey to belief in afterlife, past lives, and living with purpose. So if you really want to read more about this, and this is from a different perspective than I bring, certainly, talks a lot more about near-death experiences and past lives and reincarnation. It brings in some of the medical literature on that as well. This might be a good book for you. It comes from Jewish Lights Publishing.
Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
I think I'm not the only one, the concept of an angel being pure, having to go and purify themselves before being able to serve God is against everything I've ever been told about angels.
Yeah.
The other thing, it's a parallel to the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur, where he has to go 7 times and bathe himself and everything else before he basically confronts God.
Very nice. So very nice on both. Yeah, this is definitely influenced by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. And certainly, I don't think in terms of angelology, there is a lot out there. It's not something we spend a lot of time on in Judaism, but we tend to have this notion of angels being pure. So why is it that they have to, first of all, die? And whatever that means if you're an angel. And why do they have to, have this experience with this river? Well taken. So you know what he does at the end, the author, is he lists all of his sources. So if you really were interested in this thing, you could look up all of these sources and see how we weave them together to create this one unified source.
Sorry, what was the book again?
It's called The Mythology of Judaism. Hold on, let me pick it up. My screen hasn't changed for you, has it?
No.
Tree of Souls, The Mythology of Judaism.
Tree of Souls.
Tree of Souls, The Mythology of Judaism, yeah.
Where does the concept of deja vu fit in? Is there a parallel, like you've experienced something and you can almost swear that you have experienced it before you've gone through it? Would that be reflected anywhere in our literature?
I mean, the only place I could think of it, well, yeah. I mean, if you read the Bible, you're sometimes like, didn't I read this story already?
Yeah.
And that happens fairly often in Tanakh, where stories or motifs are repeated again, like Abraham and actually Isaac as well, and the wife's sister, and people want to sleep with them motif. Elisha and Elijah's stories, which are very similar. There's certainly others as well, like the story of Noah happens twice, the story of creation happens twice. But in terms of a personal experience of deja vu, I think it would have to fit into this idea of transmigration of souls, right? That your soul is once somewhere else, and now it is in you, and that soul has some type of memory. And when you experience something in your most recent body, your soul might say, hey, this feels like the last time when I was in another body.
Yeah.
And we're going to see. So some of these myths about souls sort of talk about that a bit. So here's another one. The souls of the righteous existed long before the creation of the world. God consulted these souls in creating the universe. As it is said, they dwelt there in the king's service. So again, who thinks like this? That the souls were there before anything else, and they counseled God and how to make the world, right? Fascinating. And Pirkei Avot, among other places, talks about the things that were made that existed before creation. And so here, souls existed before creation. God called upon the souls of the righteous who sat on the council with the supreme King of Kings to come together. He then took counsel with them before he brought the world into being, saying, let us make man, right? And this is a play on na'aseh, right? It's plural. So who's us? Can't just be God. Well, it's God and this council of righteous souls. So too did they help him with his work. Some assisted in planting and some helped to create the borders of the sea, as it is said, who set the sand as a boundary to the sea. Nor does God make any important decision without consulting the council of souls. So too did God take counsel with the souls of the righteous. He asked them if they were willing to be created, right? Like he asked the souls if they're willing to be created. And that is how the souls of the righteous, including the souls of Abraham, the other patriarchs, came into being. Right? You can take what you want out of this. But there's obviously a very mystical thinking about how things come to be, asking them if they want to be, and if they say yes, then they are in fact created. So it's almost as if the soul itself has a spark of the soul. Okay? And again, he gives an explanation of how this comes to be, and I'm not going to go through all this. This is a long one.
When you were going through rabbinic school,
Yep.
how much of your let's say lectures would be devoted to this particular topic? Was it in an amount of time or?
Zero.
Okay.
I don't think we really talk about this at all. I think the current curriculum, and this is a different story, might have requirements in Hasidus, which I didn't. Not that this is necessarily Hasidic stuff, although some of it is. JTS as an institution, was founded with the idea of Wissenschaft des Judentum, that it's the science of Judaism. And they thought a lot of this was garbage. And I told this group already, right, that when Gershom Scholem came to speak, that Finkelstein introduced them, basically saying that Kabbalah is Nourishkeit, but the study of Kabbalah is scholarship. Professor Scholem, everybody. So this isn't really up the alley, I think, of a lot of conservative Jewish rabbinic training, but there are places where this is really important. And I find it fascinating. I'm not obsessed with this kind of thing. I think people are interested in it. And like I said, in the last year, a lot of people asked me about it, so I was happy to teach about it. But it's interesting to me, not like as a solution to Jewish questions, but more as sort of Jewish anthropology more than anything else. Anyway, all souls were originally included in Adam's soul. After Adam was created, God showed him all the souls contained within his soul and all the future generations that would come. Thus, Adam is the source of all souls. That is why on Rosh Hashanah, the day that Adam was created, the entire world is judged, for Adam contained within him all the souls of mankind. Mm. After Adam sinned, the souls attached to Adam's soul descended into evil. However, some of the other souls that were originally part of Adam's soul split off. For Adam's soul originally included 600,000 old souls. And this number 600,000 comes up a lot. There's this idea of 600,000, which you have the Torah, who left Egypt, who accepted the Torah. And so maybe there are only 600,000 authentic Jewish souls around. And then there's a lot of us, because there are more than 600,000 Jews, who don't have real Jewish souls or partial Jewish souls. That's certainly a strong idea. But when Adam sinned, these souls broke into 600,000 soul roots. Ever since, these souls have been reincarnated in this world so they can rectify Adam's sin. By the way, the television show Rectify is very good. If you're looking for a show to watch, it's old, but it's fantastic. However, some say that before Adam was fully created, the souls of different people were to be found in different parts of his body. When Adam decided to eat from the tree of knowledge, elevated souls flew away from him. Then there are others who say that there were also new souls in Adam's soul, which had never come into the world. These souls were not revealed to Adam, and after he died, these new souls became separated from him. They now issue forth from the tree of life. Many angels are produced above to protect these holy souls from harm. In this way, a multitude of living souls are generated, which are drawn down to those worthy of them. And if anyone has thoughts, you're welcome to jump in anytime. Okay. So just as I was saying, so in his explanation, once the Jewish population exceeded 600,000, the problem arose about the source of their souls. The solution was the concept of sparks of souls. According to this explanation, Jewish souls received not whole souls, but sparks, portions. Rabbi Nachman describes these as offshoots of the 600,000 primary souls. In the same passage, Rabbi Nachman speaks of illustrious tzaddikim who beget souls from the heavenly source higher than the 600,000 primary sources. Right? They get sort of pure souls coming straight from above. Another take. All the souls that would ever exist from Adam till the end of days were fashioned during the 6 days of creation. All remained in the Garden of Eden on high, and all were present to the giving of the Torah. That is the meaning of the verse, whatever happens, it was designated long ago when it was known that it would happen. All souls in the world above were initially both male and female. But when they are born into this world, they are either male or female. The male soul in a male body and the female soul in a female body. If worthy, they will reunite again in marriage. They join together to form a single unit in every way, body and soul. That is why the other soul is known as a soul mate. Okay? All of these souls are present in the Garden of Eden and at the giving of the Torah. For one pure soul among them, that of the Baal Shem Tov, was not present when Adam and Eve tasted the forbidden fruit. So obviously this is the last part of myth of the followers of the Baal Shem Tov, because
Right.
he couldn't possibly have been there when there was a sin because he was such a tzaddik.
Yeah.
But this idea that souls were
Fun.
initially both male and female plays very well into the idea that Adam himself is both male and female. And it creates the stage for what a perfect marriage might look like. Okay. God has a tree of flowering souls in paradise. Okay, tree of souls, and this is what the name of the book comes from this. The angel who sits behind it is the guardian of paradise. And the tree is surrounding by the four winds of the world. From this tree blossom forth all souls, as it is said, I'm like a cypress tree in bloom, your fruit issues forth from me. And from the roots of this tree sprout the souls of all the righteous ones, whose names are inscribed there. When the souls grow ripe, they descend into the treasury of souls, where they are stored until they are called upon to be born. From this we learn that all souls are the fruit of the Holy One, blessed be he. The tree of souls produces all the souls that have ever existed or will ever exist. And when the last soul descends, the world as we know it will come to an end. So here, it's not that there is a finite number of souls that have been circulating around since creation, or that were present within Adam's soul and may be broken into many pieces, but rather they grow and they're put into storage and they're brought out as needed. But like all trees, this tree will ultimately die. And when that last soul comes out, that's the end. And it's also the end of the world. It's it's an interesting, maybe even beautiful image. And it's certainly out there. And so if you look at the sources that this is drawn from, this is Talmudic, early Midrash, more early Midrash, Zohar. So this is medieval. Nehemiah, this is Zohar, Likutei Moharan. This is Chassidus. So lots of different sources that one draws in the other. This is a bit of a long one, if I remember. Yeah. See how much. So let's skip that one. Path of the soul in the Garden of Eden. Some say that when the righteous leave this world, 3 companies of angels join them. These angels go ahead of the righteous, leading them to the Garden of Eden. And when the soul of a tzaddik leaves his body, the archangel Michael goes out to meet it, saying, "May you come in peace." Boi v'shalom. Others say that there's a column through which the soul of a person who has passed away travels from the lower Garden of Eden to the higher garden. By means of this column, the soul rises from one world to another, from one year to another, and from soul to soul. This is called the column of service and fear of heaven. Still others say that the souls of the righteous ascend the tree of life into heaven, to the celestial Garden of Eden. The garden is planted on a source of living water, and the size of the garden is 1,000 years' journey.
That's a nice thought.
Good. And I can hear birds chirping, which is just amazing. I'm not sure whose screen this is coming from, but I'm loving it.
Oh, I'm outside. I'm
Okay.
I'm at Michelle's house in the backyard.
All right. Okay, so maybe we'll finish with this one, and then we're going to break into small groups for a few minutes, and then come back and come to an end. Oh, it's so nice. There is a field where wondrous trees grow. Its splendor cannot be described. The trees and grass are holy souls that grow there. There are also many naked souls that stray beyond its borders and await repair. For even the greatest soul has difficulty re-entering that field once it has departed. And all of those exiled souls call for the field master who will engage himself in tikkun, so that those souls can be repaired. Whoever takes on that task must be steadfast and courageous. There's one such man who can only complete this task through his own death. He must endure many afflictions, but in the end, he will accomplish the work of the field and prevail. Sounds a little Christian. The idea that someone has to die in order for everything else to be repaired. But note here, it is the fate of Mashiach ben Yosef to die while engaged in messianic tasks. But the idea of there being a field and that their souls originate and they go back and they do require some fixing, right? So they're not pure, but they want to go home, right? So this way they're getting fixed by some master rather than getting fixed by being dipped through fire as we started. But this longing for return and being gathered to the other souls, the sense of growing in nature. And I think it's nice. I'm not sure about you. Okay, fine. We'll do this one, then we'll break. Because after death, the man's soul undergoes up to 4 transformations. First, it crosses the sea. And if the soul falls there, it enters the body of a fish. And if that fish is caught and someone cooks and eats that fish after saying the proper blessing, that soul is spared its suffering and ascends the Garden of Eden. You have to say the bracha. If you don't say the bracha, this soul is in big trouble. Then there are the souls that cross the ocean and pass above the trees. If the soul falls, it enters a fruit-bearing tree, and if those fruits are later picked and blessings pronounced on them, the soul also enters the Garden of Eden, its suffering at an end. So too are there souls that pass over the crops such as wheat. If the soul enters the wheat and bread is made of it, the blessings are said over it, that soul is also saved. But if the soul enters crops that are eaten by animals, it remains in sorrow. If an animal eats the crops containing this soul, it enters the animal. It suffers there until the animal is slaughtered and blessings are made over the food. And that is the soul's last chance of being saved from its suffering. Or if it is not saved, it'll continue to suffer until the end of days. But if it is saved, its soul will be saved from great suffering. It'll make its home in the Garden of Eden. Otherwise, it'll be condemned to wait until the footsteps of the Mashiach are heard. Not great, because most animals aren't kosher, and most animals aren't eaten.
Rabbi, who follows this? Do we have any sects that follow this?
I mean, I don't know what following here means.
Or practice it?
I mean, it's not something you can practice. It's not something you can sort of believe. So let's look at the note. Here. So the beginning with Sfat Kabbalists in the 16th century, the concept of metempsychosis, the transmigration of souls, becomes a central principle in Judaism known as Gilgul. And there's Sefer HaGilgulim, which is the most famous book on this. The ultimate goal of the soul from this perspective is freed from the cycle of reincarnation, much of the goal of Hinduism, achieve nirvana, and freed from any further rebirths. The fate of the soul as outlined here involves great suffering, and an even worse punishment await those souls whose sins were so great that avenging angels chase them from one place to the next. When such a wandering spirit takes possession of a living person, it is known as a dibuk. Okay? Etc., etc. Sefer Halikutim, edited by Binyamin Halevi and Elisha Festali, based on teachings of Chaim Vital, suggests that the righteous may go through Gilgul for 1,000 generations, while the unjust do so for only 3. This is because those who are learned in Torah are said to be protected from entering Gehenna, where sins are purified through the punishments of hell. Even the righteous accumulate sins that need to be cleansed, so the process of Gilgul serves to purify their souls. The unjust enter hell after only 3 generations and have their sins cleansed there. Because I don't have the book with me, I don't know what these books are. Milat Starim, those things which are hidden, is own Kabbalistic work. I don't even know what if this stands for something. And this is usually Devarim something. Brand, I don't know. I'd have to get the book out of my office and look. And if you want to do further reading, there are books about this and full-length studies. You are welcome to read and report back.
So Rabbi, question, in the last part that you just read, the soul carries the sin of the person, because as the soul is flying, it doesn't have a choice whether it falls in the sea or falls in the tree or whatever. So the soul is carrying the sin of the person that the soul was in.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The soul would have to have integrated part of the experience, the world experience it had when it was a unified whole with the previous body. Yeah. Okay. Look, some of this stuff today was very hard, strange, weird, if you want to call it that. But it's there. It's part of our tradition. It might not be something which you think about every day, might feel very far off to you, but I think it's worth sharing and recognizing that we are Jews from Toronto in the year 2021, and we're not Jews from Tzfat in the 16th or 17th century. And we have our influences and they have their influences, and all these things have some textual clue, hint, what have you, from which they explicate and bring out. Nothing is totally without precedent. But I do want to remind you, we've gone on a long journey over the course of this class, right? Starting from the Bible, which speaks almost nothing about this topic. You see developing in the early rabbinic stages, we see how there was fights about it between the Pharisees and the Essenes, the Sadducees, about whether there is any sort of afterlife at all, right? We saw the influence of Josephus, ultimately brought in from the Greeks to Josephus and Philo, and the disjoining of body from soul, whereas others fought that vehemently. And we saw Maimonides and what he did in terms of the double death, right? And reincarnation of the body and then reincarnation of the spirit. When we saw that, moderns are rejected and now are beginning to re-embrace perhaps in new ways what we make of all of this. So what I'd like to do, I'm going to break you up into 4 groups. I just want you to chat for 10 minutes, reintroduce yourselves to each other, share something that you learned that you liked, something that touched you, something that you're going to take out of this. We're going to do this for 10 minutes. So have a conversation and we'll wrap up right at the end, okay? All right, so create 4 breakout rooms. Open all rooms. All right, go on in. Gloria, I see that you haven't joined your room. I'm sure they're waiting for you. All right, welcome back, everyone. Feel free to unmute yourselves. What I like to do is just to go around, and if you want to share a sentence or two about what you took out of this class, what it meant to you. If you left with more questions than answers, or more answers than questions, what your favorite text was, whatever it is that you want to share, it's not for me to tell you what that is. So I'm just going to go clockwise around my screen,
Oh,
which means Heather, you're first.
oh, you're kidding. Okay, well, the consensus in my group, if you can have a consensus of 4 Jewish people, is about we don't believe in reincarnation, and we had interesting conversations about where this is taking us, and why we don't believe in it, because we don't know, but we'd like to have some hope. And we all talked about the Torah being a template for our knowing how to live our life, but I don't think anybody's please don't judge me by this. This shouldn't be a judgment group. That I don't believe anybody has come back to tell us for sure. So that's the thing. But I get some hope because I took a Chabad 6-week on the journey of the soul. So I do believe in a soul, but I think Jeanette had something interesting to say. Jeanette, do you want to say it? Or
We'll go around because we don't have time for a long conversation.
Rabbi, go.
Go ahead.
Hold on. Hey, Alan, what's one thing that you learned from this class that you really
I
like?
like the source. I liked all the sources.
Wonderful. That's great, Alan. Thank you. Sandy.
I was with Heather, Alan.
And you don't have to talk about what we just did in your group. This is reflections on 6 weeks for everybody.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, basically, I agree with Heather. I'd like to believe that there's a soul, and I think there's a soul. I don't know where it goes. I don't know what happens to it. And I almost sort of believe that once you're dead, you're dead. Because how do we know anything different?
Barry.
I believe what I'm getting out of this is what everybody so far has said. I know less now than when I started. And I too took the Chabad course, and I think it's going to come down to what is comfortable for me to believe. But having said that, I don't think it's right for something this important to be subjective. And I'd like to just wrap it up by saying it would have been nice. I mean, the Torah gives some of the items it covers such minute details, like the building of the Mishkan and whatnot. Would it have been so bad to include a chapter on what happens later?
Maybe if there's a second edition. Geeti.
Well, we said the same, pretty much the same thing as everybody else. We felt that we just don't want to let go of somebody that we've lost. We just don't want to let go. So we keep in our minds that there is a soul and there is a person, or not a person, but there is a soul, and that soul is with us. But we said we're not sure what we believe. And I think as Barry said, I know less than I did before. So I think that just about sums it up for me.
Thank you. Gloria, if you're there, you can unmute yourself and share a word or two. All right, if you want to jump in, Gloria, anytime you can. Otherwise, Sid, you're next. Hold on, here's Gloria. Here's Gloria, sorry. Okay, thank you. Gloria said, once you're dead, and that's the end of it.
Cheery thought.
Sid.
I agree with Gloria, but
Oh,
I don't know. It's either mythology or you're a true believer. I would have liked to see a little bit more of today's thinking on the subject. as opposed to, or has it changed? We've been brought up to believe in the soul and angels and everything else. And has it changed? And either you do or you don't.
Jeff.
I think it's a very bold topic that we've engaged in, and very challenging. There's multitude of opinions which cannot be proven. And I know initially there were those who were hesitant to participate in the course because they said, what's the point of it? But for those who, let's say, stuck it out, they became engaged, I commend everyone who stuck it out.
Go ahead. Jeanette.
There. Okay, Rob, one of the things I said is that energy can't be destroyed. It simply changes form. So therefore, energy is eternal, and we are energy. So that when we die, we can become part of the universe again. As far as souls go, I'm thinking we all would like to believe that we that our souls continue. Maybe we continue as energy, but I think most of us don't really. But what I really got out of the course, Rabbi, is I feel I know you a lot better. And that's really nice. So there, that's a
I'm glad you said
compliment.
that's really nice. That was the important part.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what your mom is going to say?
Yeah.
Hi, Mom.
Thank you, Jeanette.
You are welcome. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Lisa.
Well, you know, my parents passed away recently, so it was a difficult course to go through. Sometimes some of the graphic, like last week about the dead, maybe feeling the decomposition was disturbing, and I've had some nightmares. So,
Sorry.
but no, that's okay. It's just it's interesting course, and what I believe, you know, I believe sometimes that there could be something after, like maybe like Jeanette said, an energy, or
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't experienced anything though.
Mom.
Yes.
Got to know you better.
When I spoke to the people in my breakout group, I had this idea that people formed the idea of souls because there was a need for that to be. People wanted to have some everlasting connection to people who had died. Not only that, but many people want to think of themselves as being able to somehow be everlasting and have some kind of influence after they've died. As for the Torah not laying it out and giving details as to what souls are and how they operate, well, over the past few weeks, we've read what all these Rabbanim and other people have said that what souls are and how they do, and they've all brought forward different proof texts, and they could go to not necessarily just the Torah, but to the whole Tanakh and say, well, I believe this and this and this, and here's the proof, you know, and they'll bring out one verse from somewhere that to their mind supports their theory. So as we've seen, these entire theories are created and somehow proven through very often something from Tanakh or from Talmud or from somewhere. So, you know, it can be so that it could be supportable for them. It was a very interesting course. I don't think I had questions when I went in, but I probably have questions forming now. I'm glad I took it.
My office hours are 9 to 5, so if you have any questions.
But they come with dinner.
Carol.
I had questions going in. I've enjoyed the journey. in reading about it and debating, discussing. And I agree with you, Lynn. There's so many different opinions, and nobody has come back to tell us. And I think in the end, it's a decision we all have to make for ourselves as to what we're comfortable with and what fits with our life. And I like to think that there is a soul, and that I don't believe that my soul goes to some other person, that my soul is my soul out there. And the resurrection piece is still a struggle, but it brings me some peace and comfort to think of the souls of the people that I know that have died. And that was part of my journey that I really didn't have right at the very beginning. So it's been learning. I had questions at the beginning. I have more questions now.
I was just thinking, it's interesting. A lot of other cultures.
Lisa, can we just finish the?
Sure.
Thanks. Or Carol, were you finished?
Yeah, basically I am. And I was just going to say, Rabbi, I have your contact information, so I'll be in touch.
Gary.
Well, if this is the last session, I'm certainly sorry that I'm regretting missing all the other sessions, because from what I've listened to today, it's fabulous. I do believe that for sure. I agree with most of you that have said that because we don't know for sure what happens after we're dead. Nobody's ever come back, But I also believe that souls live on in the mind and heart of the people that remember them.
Yeah.
And I also believe that the Jewish rituals of death, dying, and mourning have been comforting and soothing to me in the past. So I'm going to stick with it and with my beliefs and things that make me feel continually connected.
Thanks, Gary. Enid.
Well, I think it's exactly what Gary and all the others have said. I mean, after the first couple of sessions we had with you, someone asked you, Rabbi, so is there a life after death? And you said yes, and you said no. And that's what we, well, I don't know where I am with this, except that as I said to our group, I know for myself, the reasons for wanting to explore this topic were personal. But it's what Gary said, and what Sid had asked about. It's part of who we are. The traditions that we have, we do not forget the dead. There's an Irish saying that says a man dies twice. First when he dies, and second when they stop talking about him. And we don't stop talking about our departed ones. And it's what Carol said. I like to believe that there is something there. And, today is the 14th anniversary of my brother's funeral. And so it's with me all through this whole day, reliving everything. And so I like to think that somewhere out there, he's feeling good because I'm thinking about him.
Right.
Lisa,
that's a nice thought, Enid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Lisa, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to say, I went to Hong Kong and they had a day for the dead, and a lot of people, other cultures have that too, like in Mexico, and where there was a walled city, and my people I was with, I went with them to where the grandparents used to live, and they left offerings there at the door. And I lived in Japan, and I remember meeting a man on a subway, and he had flowers, and he said they're for my wife, and she died like years ago, but he brings her flowers, and they have an altar. There's other cultures, and they believe like the people are still there, their spirit's still with them. So it's sort of a universal, I don't know, need or belief.
So I want to thank all of you for taking the class and engaging me on this and challenging and thinking out loud and helping me think through these things. I want to thank you, Carol, for getting me started on this path. Were not for you, this class wouldn't have happened at all. So thank you, Carol. You know, I certainly don't have a settled position on any of this. Like I said, I think some of the texts I have to read from, you know, anthropological eyes. It's our ancestors struggling with the same questions that we struggle with and trying to find answers using whatever hints they can find in text. And, you know, we didn't do the technical piece of going through and what, you know, why they would come out with that based on this pasuk or that pasuk. But you know, some of those writings, which because the way that they're laid out were harder to teach, some of the more even liberal writings are really reaffirming what it might mean to have a body and soul that are both eternal, that you have a soul that has a personality that's connected to your physicality. And I'm beginning to become maybe more comfortable with that proposition, that afterwards, it's not just some non-physical soul that does metaphysical things, but there is some sense of physicality there. I don't know what that is, but because I can't think of myself without my body, I have to think of, if something continues, it has to be recognizable. And the part that's recognizable, at least that I think is recognizable, is me that I look at in the mirror. And that works for me right now. But I also hope that what happens next, if anything, is a relaxing, because I find this world to be pretty tiring at times.
Yeah.
And
No, you're young.
you
It
know,
gets
you don't want,
It's worse.
when I watch people, unfortunately, and you know, all of us within, whether it's family or otherwise, you know, we've seen people slowly lose their abilities and often say, listen, Rabbi, I'm ready. I'm tired. You know, I'm not getting better. I know that. You know, I'm ready for that to happen, and I'd rather it happen sooner rather than later. And the hope is that, you know, when they take their last breath, whatever happens next, it's a revivification of the spirit and the soul, that it brings a life that is meaningful and beautiful and joyful, and not with the pain that so often exists in this world. So with that, we will come to an end. Once again, Toda Rabba, thanks for joining. And we've lots of good stuff coming up with the shul, so read those emails, check the bulletin, and please God, we'll all see each other in this world in person sooner rather than later.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
It was wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.